In my last video, I talked about how you can improve your squat depth, and one of my recommendations was that you need to squat for your body type. Now, out of these two people, who do you think is gonna have an easier time squatting? If you pick the person on the left, then you're right. What's up, everybody? My name is Anand from UnderdogStrength.com, and if your goal is to gain muscle, lose fat, and to get strong, then make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. The person on the right has really long legs, and as a result, his range of motion will be greater. To account for this increased range of motion, he will have to modify his technique quite a bit just to be able to hit depth. On your right, you can see this is what is considered as a deep squat. Over here, you can see this is a quarter squat, this is a half squat, this is an above parallel squat, and this is a below parallel squat. Regardless of your body type, almost anyone can learn how to squat this deep. So now I'm going to explain how the length of your femur bone, which is your thigh bone, affects how you squat. So I'm here on this website called athleticdesign.se. So they have an interactive model of a person squatting. So here you can see this is a fairly average built person. If you want to have a look at the skeleton, you can do so. This is the femur bone. Now let's look at how this person is going to squat. You see, this is considered as the minimum depth, although he could go as low as his mobility allows him to do so. But this is a pretty standard squat. Now let's look at some extreme examples. Let's make his legs really short. Now do you see the decreased range of motion? Now look at the other extreme. This person has really long femur bones. If you can see the skeleton, it's all the way from here to here. Here you can see that this person will have a lot harder time squatting to depth because of his long legs. You can see his knees can only go so far, and he will have to sit back a lot more just to be able to hit depth, and he will have to his torso will have to lean a lot more forward just to stay balanced, because at the end of the day the barbell has to stay balanced over the middle of the foot. So you can clearly see that a person with shorter legs will have an easier time hitting depth than a person with longer legs. So if you're built more like the person on the right, there's two things you can do. The first thing you can do is to simply squat wider. As you can see, I'm squatting slightly wider than most people, but what this does is it clears up space for me to squat deep. And another advantage of squatting with a wider stance is that it requires less dorsiflexion because you're able to spread your feet out more. Essentially, what you're doing by squatting wide is you're reducing the apparent length of your femurs from the side because your feet are pointing out more and your knees are going out more instead of straight forward. And this will give a similar effect as if a person with shorter legs is squatting with a narrower stance. Alright guys, let's compare three different squat stances: a narrow stance, a medium stance, and a wide stance. If you're having trouble hitting depth and you squat with a narrow stance, then you might want to consider squatting with a slightly wider stance. As you can see on the left, I'm barely able to hit depth when I'm using a narrow stance simply because I'm running out of space. Your knees can only go so far forward, and ultimately you'd run out of dorsiflexion. And the other thing that's gonna happen is your knees are gonna jam up against your body, which will prevent you from hitting depth. Now, if you were to slightly widen your stance and drive your knees out, like you can see on the medium stance, you can see that I can easily hit depth on this one. But on the right, you can see you also don't want to go too wide, because if you go too wide, your adductors will tighten and they will prevent you from going much deeper. So let's look at the narrow stance squat on the left versus a wide stance squat on the right. One thing that should be apparent to you is the apparent length of the femur bone. Even though I'm the same height in both of these, I'm artificially shortening my legs by going wider. You can clearly see that I've drawn a red line just to point out the length of the femur you can see from the side. And on the left with the narrow stance, my femur bone appears to be a lot longer than on the right. Now, one of the keys of squatting to depth is you want to try to stay as upright as possible if your goal is to squat as deep as possible. And this is pretty much inevitable, especially if you have longer legs, because you're gonna have to lean forward just to stay balanced. But there's ways of working around this. We already discussed the first way, which was to squat wider, because the wider you squat, the more upright you can stay. And but for some reason, if this does not work for you, maybe you don't have the mobility to squat wide, or maybe that's not your strongest point or your strongest technique. The other option is to use squat shoes. We all have limited dorsiflexion mobility, meaning your knees can only travel so forward before your heels start coming off the floor. But what squat shoes do is that they allow your knees to travel more forward, and the more your knees travel forward, the more upright you can stay. So here you can see a picture of myself. On the left, I'm using squat shoes, the Nike Romaleos, and on the right, I'm using a pair of flat shoes, which are the Reebok CrossFit Light TRs. At first glance, these forms look pretty similar, but what you will see is, first of all, on the left, the depth is slightly better, but you will also see that the knees travel a little bit more forward, and you will finally see that my torso is a bit more upright on the left compared to the right. Now, if this is not clear to you, let me draw a line just to make this more clear. So with this line you can see my back angle, my femur angle, and the angle of my shins. What you will see is that on the left where I'm using squat shoes, the knee angle is more closed, but the hip angle is more open, meaning my torso is more upright. On the right you will see my hip angle is a bit more closed, but my knee angle is a bit more open. So there you have it, guys. I hope these two tips will help you. So if you have long legs, you can do two things. You can either squat a little bit wider, or you can use squat shoes, and you can even use a combination of the two to get the best of both worlds. So I hope you like this video. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button. If you want to watch more videos like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.